I am the one who shines through you when you leave me room.
Gemini, perseverance leading to faithfulness. Hi everyone, this month's virtue practice, perseverance leading to faithfulness, we've chosen Saint Teresa of Avila, or of
Avila,
as it's said, pronounced correctly apparently. And it's an interesting thing because clearly we're bringing our relationship to these saints and how they've affected us. And Saint Teresa for me has been a strong part of my journey, as those of you that may have read my first book, her poetry is in there, along with St. John of the Cross, who was also in the same stream as her, and although he was quite a lot younger than her, they had a really extraordinary connection as companions on the path. Now, how I first came about the work of St. Teresa was interesting. I was studying anthroposophy. I was in my early 20s, and one of the teachers had asked us to talk about what is the inner world like, or write a piece on something to do with the inner world. And then I brought my experience of that, and the teacher claimed that I was plagiarizing Saint Teresa and her work on the interior castle. Now, I'd never met this work before, and I certainly didn't have a connection to the saint, but that's how I got interested in her. I thought, what is it that's familiar or common in what I'm saying and what this saint has written about? And so her journey is extraordinary, really, because you can see this in the interior castle, how she has to persevere, and it really is her faithfulness in a way that helps her perseverance, and her perseverance that develops her faithfulness, as she goes through these extraordinary trials of the inner world and encounters probably some of the hardest tests, including a lot of physical pain and discomfort. And at the same time, she has to navigate as a mystic the religious order that she's involved with. And so she's also trying to navigate the fact that she's a very potent and powerful female force in a order that holds a lot of what she's bringing back. I think it was much more after her death, and also because of those that were interested in St. Teresa, that St. Teresa really became more known. There's a couple of aspects that really spoke to me about her. One was this deep willingness to go into the interior world and to meet whatever was necessary in order to discover the truth. And she had to really go through that in a dynamic way, where it was never about information, it was all about the journey that she took. And the other aspect for me with St. Teresa is something that has been really a conversation I've had with not many, but a few deeply close colleagues on the path, about how it is that very often not many people understand what you're going through, particularly when it's these esoteric experiences. They're not something you can converse with everyone about. And yet there are certain saints like Saint Teresa and St. John of the Cross, or St. Francis and St. Clare, who seem to be able to have a companion in that journey. And that companionship where someone really understands your inner development, or is willing to hold something when you can't. And we see that in both the story of St. Francis with St. Clare, but also St. Teresa with St. John. There were times where they were going through such difficulty that they actually asked the other, can you pray for me? Can you meditate on this for me? Because I can't, I'm in a place where I can't receive the insights I need. And that always touched me so deeply, that someone could be that close to you, that they could, on such a personal and intimately individualized journey, also participate in such a way that was a great support. And yeah, so there were the two aspects of St. Teresa's life that have lived with me. One is this willingness to go bravely and to persevere and to deepen her faith through this perseverance. And the other was her relationship with St. John of the Cross. I'm aware that in recent days, because of some of St. John's writings, St. John of the Cross's writings, that he's been diminished in his value or being called a racist. And I understand that in our age. And yet at the same time, we're not speaking about those outer pictures of these saints, but rather these inner pictures. And this esoteric reality that sometimes one has to journey in places where we could say we unfold the immortal in us. At the same time, we have to bear the mortal part of our being, the part that makes mistakes, that doesn't meet the challenge, that can't perceive the whole, that in a way is diverted. And so in the saint's life, we often see that reality, that they're carrying both of these things together. And one of the ways I see that in St. Teresa is that she really did bow down to the religious order, even though you could see her wisdom and her mysticism was far beyond what those around her were carrying. She continued, like in most of her writings, to say, oh, and, please check this out with your cardinal, or please check this out with your leader. Rather than listen to her, because she was having to walk that real tightrope. And that is something really we could say is connected to her mortal being, and a reality that often we have to carry. We walk this tightrope of having to interface with the world and the restrictions and the constrictions that are given to us in the bodies we're in or the role that we're in. And yet we're discovering these realms of being and this understanding that actually empowers the soul to a kind of liberation and love that those that haven't walked it would not actually know about. So St. Teresa has always lived strongly with me. Her writings come naturally to speak about. I think it's really connected to this perseverance and faithfulness, never giving up even under the trials of both one's interior difficulties but also the exterior difficulties. Now, I know that St. Teresa is not someone that you've really got the same affinity individually with, but you've spent a lot of time on the land that she walked. I went to certain places in Spain where she ministered. There was one place called Caravaca de la Cruz. I'm going to get all of the names wrong, but where she actually worked with St. John, and it's a very special place in Spain, not so well known, but it it was wonderful to be on the land where these saints have actually ministered their revelations, brought into life what they had come to. So can you say something about your time with that land? And of course that's led you to various songs or pieces of music that you could share, but there's a particular piece that you're going to share today.
Yeah. The piece that I'm going to share today is called Las Colinas de las Joyas, and which really means the jeweled hills. But where I was in southern Spain, it was at that time that I was engaged in quite deep meditation on a daily basis. And although I was on a rooftop terrace overlooking the Mediterranean, and behind me were these hills, the piece really talks about the jeweled hills within that we discover through silent sitting, through observation. But the land itself of Spain, the dusty trails through the hills, instill something that something of the mystic. To me, I think if you're sensitive, you can't help but feel a deep beauty, and then when you come across an old church in a hilltop village, and you go in and you sit silently in the back, whether people are praying or not, and just go into yourself. There is something special there, I think, and although it's you're in a physical environment, it's a physical environment that's been used to go within for hundreds and hundreds of years. And I have the feeling that being in a place like that makes it easier to slip within and go into that silent space and walk those jeweled hills.
Well, that's really good. It's really, I really always like the way that you bring these pictures about that help us enter into this experience, not just through your music, but also the way you've experienced the life around you. I obviously am looking through this lens of inner development, and so for me, when I'm affected by some activity outside, I'm looking for a correlation. There is a mental principle of trying to understand it so that I can speak about it to others. And at the same time, you know, as you said, I'm a sensitive, so I do get impressions very deeply. But then I try to work with those impressions to bring it into a thought process. In one direction or another, that might be successful. But what I would say is that for you, that comes really naturally and always has done. To be able to, you said you were 12 when you first wanted to take the impression of what was outside of you and bring it into a song.
Well, actually, I discovered meditation in the piano rooms of Colchester School in Corbridge, Northumberland, and partly because I was a very sensitive kid, bundled off to school at age 8. And to me, it was a very harsh environment. And one of the safest, quietest places was the piano rooms when there was nobody there. So I'd often hide myself away in the piano room and I'd depress the pedal of the sustain pedal on a piano and just play a note, and close my eyes and listen to that note, and it would reverberate, and then I'd like try to follow the note into forever. And then if I stamped on the sustain pedal, it reverberated all the strings. And I had my eyes closed, and it was like I could feel a city, a beautiful city within me. And so I actually discovered meditation through music, through that way. And then I had this passion arose to discover that city within.
Yeah. And put what you was experiencing in the world into song.
Through music, yeah. Yeah, which is what I think I've been doing my whole life. Even though I may have got distracted along the way in the musical sphere, performing on stage and, but then, you get to see your ego very much about that. And, but if I go back and listen to my own songs, or I just see someone that's on an inner path. And in fact, interestingly enough, sometimes I can go back to my early songs and feel like I was a teacher then to my future self.
Yeah.
And that I'm listening and going, oh, yes.
Yeah.
When at the time, I might have been expressing something that I couldn't quite understand myself.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's really quite something. And I think what you're describing, this interiority, this interior space, and the sensitivity to that is something that Saint Teresa also tried to put into words, because she wanted to help others on the journey into this interior realm. It's not always easy. We don't always face angels and support. We also face the crocodiles and the beasts that we have to encounter. And yet with perseverance and faithfulness, we stay on the path. And, we've both been on this journey for a long, long time. We've not moved from it, even though we've done many things in our outer life. We've not moved from persevering with the inner
No,
journey.
that's right. Even though at times we feel we're not on the path, we're still on the path, because to be not on the path is a part of the path. And you understand that at a later date. Oh, that's why, that's what was happening.
Yeah.
But all the time there's this inner pull to go within, to get understanding, and for myself, especially these days, just to feel the peace within.
So we're now going to listen to this piece of music. It may not cultivate for the listener a sense of perseverance and faithfulness, because the song, the pieces of music are not intended to cultivate the virtue, but rather help us to go into that experiencing, feeling realm that we can then take into this next stage. After we've listened to the music, I'll come back and lead us into working with the virtue. Thank you. So when we let this music go, and perhaps it is the saint, Saint Teresa, or perhaps it is the virtue that is drawn here and cultivated in your soul, so that you can really feel that feeling experience of perseverance or faithfulness or one of the virtues build in your heart, and then follow the stream. I feel this virtue in my heart. This virtue turns to warmth in my heart. My heart's force streams into my hands. My heart's force streams into my feet. My heart's force is a gift from the divine, and the stream is up into the head. I will work with this divine gift. Thus may I hope to become strong.
I am the one who shines through.